All right, everybody. Glad to have you guys on board with this new and first meeting of the Diverse Hiring and Retention Working Group meeting. So, before we get started, I just want to start off with the agenda. So, we're going to follow this along with the link. You can see it here, and you should have it in your email. And Tony chatted throughout the link. And the first place we're going to start is introductions and go all the way to when we adjourn with a small Q&A session beforehand. All right, so we're just going to go around with everyone and take this time to introduce yourself. So you want to do your name, organization, and what brings you here. So my name is Jordan Guyton. I'm AmeriCorps Vista with Open Media Foundation, and I am focusing on the sector partnerships. And the thing that brought me here is I'm very passionate about diversity, engagement, and building more inclusive environments when it comes to media and journalism.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Hannah Hines. I'm also an AmeriCorps Vista at Open Media Foundation. I'm focusing on our Open Media Career Engine hiring service. And what brings me here today is that I'm super excited to support having a media that tells everybody's story.
My name is Lee. I work as a culture and development coordinator at Open Media Foundation, and I helped a project manage the Open Media Career Engine. And I'm just very interested in seeing really what everybody's up to and how we can better do this work across our sector.
Hey everyone, my name is Philip Clapham. I'm with the Colorado Media Project. I, like most of you, am sort of here to take a pulse check, and very passionate about how we, particularly in Colorado, can strengthen local media news for and by folks of color and underrepresented communities.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Kim Salvaggio. I work for Rocky Mountain Public Media, which is PBS, Kuvo Jazz, and The Drop. My responsibility is our DEI initiatives, as well as all of our people at the station here in Colorado. What brings me here? I have been working in the media space for about 22 years. My last 10 years has been spent with a very large focus on how to bring more diversity into newsrooms or media in general. But for a couple years, I focused really primarily on local newsrooms. So that's why I'm here.
I'll go next. I'm Bae Edwards, the communications coordinator at the Colorado Press Association. And I'm here to represent our members and kind of relay techniques and help to bring diversity to those newsrooms around the state. And I'm interested to see what we can all do together.
My name is Colleen Winnetka. I'm with the Colorado Workforce Development Council. This is my job to work on sector partnerships. I help with introducing people, and getting retail sector partnerships is the initial reason I was hired onto the organization. But I go and assist and offer any support that we can throughout the state. So I travel quite a bit and try and really do that collaboration and sharing what's going on in other areas.
All right, maybe I'll go next. All right, my name is Brett Walker. I'm with Denver Workforce Services. We're under the Department of Denver Economic Development and Opportunity. We also have contracted partners for our workforce centers, and their name is ResCare. Kelly is the one that actually said that I might be available for this call. So got an email this morning that said, yeah, I'll definitely join. So that's why I'm here. But City and County of Denver, my team under Workforce Services, we co-convene or convene 6 major sector partnerships in Denver. And just to give you kind of an idea, there's about 20, Colleen, what is it, about 26 active sector partnerships in the state of Colorado. So we do a lot in sector partnerships, but what we do is connect our employers to our job seekers and vice versa. So we really make sure that diversity and inclusion is a big part of everyone's aspect of workforce, and we're here to help really connect you to a diverse workforce.
I think you're muted, Tony.
Andrew?
Sure, I'll introduce myself. Just wanted to confirm first. Hello, my name is Andrew Devigal. What brought me here today was Tony invited me, but why I said yes is because I too care about journalism and engagement and the health of our local information ecosystem to be just. And yeah, so, and I'm looking forward. So I appreciate Tony's invitation and looking forward to the conversation and how I might be able to contribute that. I'm actually based in Portland, Oregon, where I work at the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication. And I'll talk a little bit about our project called Gather that really is focused on engaged journalists.
Great. Tony?
Yeah, my name is Tony Shawcross. I'm the executive director of the Open Media Foundation. And I'm here because we've started a program that now is taking part in this Next Generation Sectors Partnership program with Colorado Workforce Development Council and Colorado Department of Labor. And that brings us to our first agenda item, which is Colleen is going to tell us a little bit about the Next Generation Sector Partnership model and how they've worked through that model to help increase opportunities, workforce opportunities in other sectors and other industries. Colleen, will you take over?
I think we forgot Debbie.
Oh, Debbie, sorry. What's next? Sorry, Jordan, you're saying Debbie's next?
Yeah, Debbie, are you on the call?
Oh, you mean for introductions?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, everyone doesn't have to introduce themselves, but yeah, if Debbie wants to introduce herself, that'd be great.
Okay.
And Jordan, will you take us to the next slide while we're waiting for Colleen or Debbie to jump in?
All right. You want me to play the video?
Colleen,
Okay.
what do you think? Should we play the video?
We could, that's fine actually. If you want to do that, I'll stop sharing my screen and we can jump to that.
Or we can hop to your screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jordan, just since we're a little tight on time, let's just have Colleen kind of explain it, and we can share that. We can share that link. I'll put it in the comments right now.
Okay.
So I think you have to stop sharing for her to be able to share.
All right.
Okay, and that's working now, I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, next generation sector partnerships, besides being kind of a weird sounding thing, they definitely don't flow very well. Just to let you guys know, I describe it typically similar to a chamber of commerce, but on steroids, because we deal on a regional level. It's not just that town. However, we focus on a specific industry because, of course, like a chamber would have all the industry in the area, but there's just so many things that are specific to the individual industries. So we try and have an industry-driven, community-supported partnership. And I also compare it to similar to an association, because people think of that then, well, we have this association or that association, but many times those associations focus on primarily the politics or getting things gone through local like that. So it's really a way to combine resources. So associations absolutely invited, chambers of commerce, they can come as well. But we're trying to keep it with business and that specific industry in the center of the table. And when we do the launch meetings, we literally physically set it up like this, where the business people are in a circle. So they're the ones kind of communicating, talking, And when we start out, all these other sources, the community college, K-12, workforce centers, economic developers, they sit around the outside and they sit in listen only mode, because even if a business brings up a problem that they're like, ooh, I've got a solution, there's still other choices and other potential. And maybe if your solution hasn't really quite connected, maybe we need to tweak it or change something or change our marketing and communication. So now our cities and towns know how to access what we have to offer. So it does become a collaboration. It starts out with that brainstorming and the focus from the industry, which is part of how we got to this conversation today, focusing on diversity. And yeah, I just wanted to share a couple of examples of different partnerships and what they've been able to do. One on a large scale, different industry in Hawaii, went to a next generation training in Texas, and the Hawaiian partnership, the doctor there, they had a healthcare partnership. And as we've seen in Denver, of course, there's more and more and more homelessness, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. Well, Hawaii is the state with the biggest amount of homelessness, and with the hospitals, it was becoming a huge strain of people just going to the ER whenever they got sick or had issues. But they kind of pooled all their resources and looked and kind of opened their books with their competitors of going, hey, who's our most expensive people? Because they literally had some people that were coming to the hospital, well, to the ER 200 times in a month. And that would be for somebody that maybe had dialysis or something like that. But it's a huge strain on their resources and dollars if these people are in, obviously, sometimes multiple times in a day. So they looked and they worked together to find out, their kind of highest users and highest offenders. But it wasn't to ban them or anything, but they looked at the other community organizations that offered support and, maybe housing help and maybe driving you to doctor's appointments and maybe getting that counselor to help you with your, balance of what do I do? How do I navigate something besides just, I know the hospital's here, that's where I go. And so by collaborating together, they were able to really knock down that repetitive use by going to the wrong resource and reconnecting people so they would have that housing assistance and diabetic follow-up care. And so it saved not only a lot of money, it's also saving the health and the livelihood of those people that are homeless. And they actually were able to combine together and bill back to the insurance company because they were able to map out, look, we've saved you this many millions of dollars from this person, this person, this person, this is what we were billing, now this is. And they actually got the insurance company to pay them money for a portion of what they saved. So that was a huge thing that they did by collaborating together that they would not have been able to do except through this type of a partnership model. More close to home, there's also the tech sector partnerships here in Colorado. And so by tying in and working with places like Girls Inc. and Denver Public Schools, they're really reaching out and trying to get girls into that, the tech area and more of those STEM fields that a lot of kids are not going into. So, so yeah, that's just a couple of collaborations that have been going on, and yeah, it's usually very successful when people make the effort and really put in the time to collaborate and communicate, and then take that initiative as well and commit to doing small steps. Might be an hour or two a month. So it's usually a 90-day goal where it's like, okay, I'm going to work on this. I can take this step, whether it is money, time, resources that somebody can commit to, because without that business commitment, it's not going to move forward and it's not going to have lasting effect. So does anybody have any questions on that, or did you guys need me to expand any further?
Good. If not, we'll keep moving forward, and Colleen is going to be involved throughout the agenda, so there'll be more chances to understand the next generation sector partnership model. They've had a lot of success in other sectors, and even though media and journalism represents a smaller portion of the workforce, the social ramifications of having a diverse workforce in media and journalism, it's just very important to the health of our democracy. And to make sure that everybody's represented. So we're really excited to be leveraging their kind of proven model for this sector and playing this convener role. The model has most of the work done in working groups. So I think Philip is with us from Colorado Media Project, and prior to him joining Colorado Media Project, did a few sessions with Independent News Network or Investigative News Network and Boston Consulting Group. And we've done a few sessions, including our launch meeting, where we tried to understand what are these kind of shared overlapping priorities for our sector. We came up with about 6 of them, many of whom the Colorado Media Project is really championing, and a couple of which we are. This is one of those working groups. This is a working group focused on hiring and retaining a more diverse workforce in Colorado media and journalism. The goal of this specific working group is to share strategies and resources for diversifying media staff so that we can better reflect and represent the diversity of our audiences. And we'll just kind of speed through this because I know our first presentation of Kim and Dr. Tara J, they're on a bit of a time crunch. But Jordan, do you want to quickly just talk about some statistics about diversity in our specific sector?
Yeah, sure thing. I'll pull these up real quick here.
So while he's pulling that up, I'll just mention that the workforce of the media tends to be, media and journalism organizations tend to be, and we have some links in the agenda, 10 to 20% less diverse than the general workforce average in the country. So yeah, that's the first slide.
Yep. So with this problem, we had a few statistics that were done through RTDNA and ASNE, and I combined them in a bar graph to see where the statistics lie. So looking at the statistics, we see that it's still overwhelmingly a white population that are filling these jobs throughout radio, newspaper, and television. And compared to when you combine it with the gender, it's still white male. Now, with this partnership, we're looking at where can we improve on getting these statistics to better reflect what Colorado actually looks like. Colorado is a mosaic. It is not something that is just what these statistics are, that of the people that's in the jobs. We want to see other people of color, other people of genders to hop into these jobs and be able to tell their story effectively and also relate to what it looks like on an everyday basis. All right, so the next thing that I'm gonna do is we're gonna jump ahead a little bit, because with diversity, you also have to find out a way to retain those people that you attracted. So I'm gonna pass it off to Kim and Dr. Tara J here to talk more about how can we keep people on board.
Hi, so I introduced myself in the beginning, but Dr. Tara J didn't have an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Tara, I'll let you introduce yourself before we dive into what we've been doing at Rocky Mountain Public Media.
Thank you, Kim. I am Tara, Dr. J. My pronouns are they, them, and I am consulting with Rocky Mountain PBS to do some work around diversity. Excuse me, sorry.
So Tara and I have actually worked together for a few years. And when I came to Rocky Mountain Public Media, one of the things I was really interested in doing with them was addressing very much what Jordan had laid out for us, that when you're looking at the demographics of how our country is growing and changing, and then you saw the data about what is happening in newsrooms, coming up with ways of how we were going to start to close that gap. So where I have found other organizations that I've worked with in the past, when you ask them, well, what are you doing to diversify your newsroom? I kept getting the same answer over and over, which is, hey, we notified such and such organization that represents such and such a people that we have an opening in our newsroom and we're hoping that they apply. And to me, the elephant in the room that wasn't being addressed is that we continually do this. And then we ask people of a certain background to show up. And the word that I would hear over and over again is, how can you sound commercial? And what commercial means, and we all know this, is it means, can you sound white? And that is not in any way, shape, or form diversifying or having representation of all different types of Americans or people that have come to this country to consume news or be a part of news. So that was really, when I started interviewing for my job at Rocky Mountain Public Media, I was really clear that if I was coming in under this initiative to make them a more diverse and equitable and inclusive organization, that way of thinking is not going to work. It's archaic, it's been proven not to work, and we need to push forward into adopting new ways of how we actually talk about diversity in our workforce. So that's where Dr. J came in, is that I felt that the organization needed to be able to recruit a diverse workforce and to retain them and to make it an equitable space. We needed an expert, and that was where Dr. J came in. I use the title as that they came in as our occupational therapist. So I'll let you talk a little bit about that work, Tara, and then I'll talk about some of the things that we've done to sort of change the landscape there.
So coming in as a therapist, there's therapeutic process around digging into anti-racist processes. So coming in and doing this work, one of the things that we discussed a lot was the fact that as we progressed and did the first assessment to actually see like where the overall layout was, from there, understanding what trainings needed to be put in place with those trainings is really having an implementation process to be able to put into that. But also when you start to do a cultural shift, you also need to make sure that there is scaffolding essentially around the people who are already in the organization. And that's really where I'm coming in, because a lot of times when there's a cultural shift, people push back. And with that pushback, there's an understanding that it's a personal thing, and being able to work with that so that they can show up to work as an authentic and whole person, but also be informed with what is coming up for them. So that's how I'm really coming in and basically kind of just backing up a lot of the stuff that Kim is already doing and making sure that when people have questions or they're having difficulties around it or just struggling with looking at their own bias, that they have someone that they can come to, we can have this conversation around it so that it's not acting out within the organization.
So in addition, we've also changed a lot of our policies around the way that we did performance management, the way that we calibrated people's performance to make sure that they were being measured accurately, the way that we did hiring and job negotiation, as far as we publish everything from salary bands and have a pay equity project so that we knew that we were leveling the playing field and we could remove some of the bias that was within all of us in our hiring practices. In addition to that, as Tara was talking about, we're really looking at capacity building within the organization so that, as Tara said, when somebody is coming in as their authentic self, that we're ready and able to support them. For our content and how we're hoping to build our newsroom is that as we go through that process as an organization, it's going to show up in our content, because we will hopefully be recruiting and diversifying our staff, and so that our content is going to speak to the people that live and breathe in these very communities, and is going to encourage them to want to work with us in their authentic voice. So the relevancy of our content will be one of the things that improves. And then typically, we all know this, that the more relevant our content is in a newsroom, that is where your revenue will follow it. Your revenue, your ability to retain the staff, the authenticity of the voice, it's going to resonate with the engagement of the Colorado public. So it may sound like a roundabout way to say, hey, we want to diversify our organization, but the way that the organization, I think, was standing a few years ago in other newsrooms that I've worked in, if you're not able to recognize people in their authentic voices, why would they come work for you as a person of diversity? You wouldn't do that, which is typically where I think we have not seen the needle move.
Well, thank you, guys. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to jump in and ask Kim and Dr. J any questions you guys have. Again, we're going a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. So Dr. Tara, I'm curious, like how often you're working with the staff. Is there regular PDs that you host? Is it like, do you come in on staff meetings, or do you just hold like one-on-one, like small group councils?
So coming in, we are working on coming up with a training schedule so that people have the ability to come in as a group, but a lot of that really deep-seated stuff is one-on-one, so that people have the ability to come in and really just ask the questions that they normally wouldn't ask in a group. So it's a balance of both.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, I want to say, for our staff, the presence of having Dr. J with us is so important too, that it is not actually a member of your staff, that you hire a professional with the credentials that Dr. J has. Although my role there is also to be a part of the human resources team and culture, that people can absolutely come to me. Some of the work that Tara is doing with them, you might not want your person on staff to hold that information. And that's where the sort of anonymous way that Tara can collect this information, make people feel safe, because you're talking about some pretty deep things that are not something someone may want to say. You might be able to see my performance evaluation or my pay. I might not want to disclose these things to you, but I know that I need a safe space to work on them. And that's what Tara has been able to provide our organization, that I think has made the project so far a success.
Great. So as we mentioned, we're going a little bit out of order. You know, we're going to also present tools and resources for getting a more diverse workforce, and then this piece of just retaining a diverse workforce.
Can I also ask another question?
Yeah, please.
So I am curious, I'm super curious about that work, and I'm not sure how long your partnership has lasted between the two of you and what you're working on in Rocky Mountain, but have you been able to measure any metrics, like in terms of retention or the just how the culture has shifted?
It's a great question. That's actually one of our, at least for me, that's one of our key performance indicators that we'll look at, is our ability to start really recruiting a more diverse staff. The project started, I mean, Tara and I have known each other for years, but the project really started about 4 months ago. So we're still in that preliminary stage of capacity building. So we haven't been able to really measure a lot yet. The only thing I'll say is, once we started talking about it and we started doing some of the work, the operative of DEI is now, it's starting to become embedded in almost every department within the organization. So that was one of my first, factors that I was like, okay, this is really resonating with people. To the point where now we're putting out marketing, and this isn't uncommon, we're putting out marketing language, and it's starting to go through our DEI department to make sure that it's cohesive and that it's seen through an equitable lens. That wasn't happening a year ago or even 6 months ago. but the actual numbers of measurement of retention, we haven't been doing it for a year yet to be able to capture that.
One request I would have of you, Kim, if you're open to, and something that's come up in this working group, I know you guys might not be able to stay till the part 5 of our agenda, which is
I know, I apologize. I actually have to jump off in about 4 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, so that'll be getting into the champion-driven priorities. One of the things that's come up is we've had about 7 groups so far in the industry expressing a desire to participate in this working group. And as we've talked about goals, one of the goals is us coming up with some like shared metrics so that we can even just set a baseline right now that just says like, what are we going to measure? How are we going to measure this? And how are we going to measure progress? So whether or not you guys already have those kind of like metrics or thing I would love is for you to just keep us all posted as to what those are so that maybe we can start devising as a group how we can measure this from either a cultural perspective inside of our organization and retention metric or a just basic, diversity of staff metrics.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share all of our metrics as we collect them with the group.
Great.
And I apologize, I can't stay on.
That's okay.
It's one of those days.
Same with me. I have to jump into a session, so.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for sharing.
Yes, thank you. And anybody that would like further information about the project, Tony and Jordan both have my email on how to get in contact with me. So if you're interested in the project, please reach out to me. I'm happy to discuss it anytime.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye all.
Awesome, thank you.
So Jordan, before we introduce Andrew, which is more on the kind of retention side, let's go back in the agenda to the original part 3 and just, oh no, sorry, part 4, and just go back now to the order that we were planning on going through.
Okay.
All
right.
Good.
So there we go. So next thing is we're going to do more presentations on what initiatives that are you currently working on to attract and retain diverse candidates. So without further ado, Andrew, I'm gonna pass it off to you.
Wait, sorry.
Oh.
Let's just go with that slide you've got up right there, Jordan. So first half of this is recruiting diverse staff. And so Jordan's going to tell us a little bit about this career engine service that we're offering for free to the local media sector, in case anybody's not aware of this. Jordan, will you just go over these kind of like 7 steps that you and Hannah are providing as a free service to Colorado media organizations?
Yeah, totally. And feel free to jump in at any time, Hannah. So the first thing that we do, and I've added one word for each one, is coaching. So we help the employers with their job descriptions to make it more inclusive and draw more of an audience that's of diversity. And then we also do a maximum of exposure. So we post it more on job sites. So I think, how many do we have right now, Hannah?
For job sites, we have a pretty extensive list, but as of for free job sites, I think we have a little over 10.
Okay, so with that, we're able to draw a broad audience and increase our applicant pool. And then from there, we partner with the Denver workforce, places like ResCare, and to, find more things like matching funds or seeing if somebody's salary, like with ResCare, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, with ResCare, they were able to pay a portion of somebody's salary.
Yeah, and Brett's going to talk about that in the next bullet, but yeah, the core of this is just that we can help reach out to other partners to find candidates that might be eligible for on-the-job training or matching funds or other government subsidized programs, one of which Brett is going to talk about next as soon as Jordan's done explaining this service.
Right. And from there, we have a whole database of resumes. We do the surveys for each applicant just to get more of a framework of who they are. We ask additional questions after they apply, such as of their background. So from gender, race, income level, just to see if we're also better serving people just outside of the typical things such as gender and race. We also ask things such as like if they ever have TANF or the typical questions that you'll see when applying. And we also use the top grading way. This method has been proven time and time throughout just to see how we can rank and classify each candidate. And from there, we're able to send it to the companies that we're partnered with and know based off of our recommendations and where they feel, they can make that final decision. And then along with that, we make it simplified for you, do a time saving. So we organize them, collate them, and have everybody in one place. So that way, when we send it out to you, you can see each applicant individually as well on the list. And then we also schedule the first round interviews based off of your availability as well after following these steps.
So essentially for media organizations, journalism organizations that don't have a large HR department, we've got 2 experienced full-time AmeriCorps Vistas and our staff that follow this program with support from Top Grading and other partners to make sure that even if you don't have a large HR staff, that you have this resource to make sure that your openings have the greatest opportunity of having diverse candidates. Will you take us to the next slide, please, Jordan?
Yep.
And we evaluate all the different job boards that we use for male versus female applicants that are coming in from each, for white and people of color, also people with disabilities. So we're evaluating all these different job boards so that we can make sure that your jobs are getting posted to sites that have the best chance of reaching more diverse candidates. So this is some of our initial data from the first 1,000 or so. We've only helped hire maybe 6 or 7 jobs so far, including a couple of our own. But this is from our preliminary data of candidates that have applied so far. So now we were going to introduce Brett Walker from the Denver Office of Workforce Services to talk to us a little bit about their program, which we've used. And I should just say before Brett even starts talking, when we hired our project manager position, we had over 200 applicants for that position. Following the top grading model, we did a first round interview with about 20 of them, and then a really long second round interview with like 6 or 7. And the Denver Office of Economic Development and Rest Care provided, I think, 5 or 6 candidates for that position. And out of the 200 plus applicants that we had, we interviewed all 6 of those applicants because they were so good. And I think like 4 of the 6 finalists were from them. So the candidates that we got through that program were just really stellar. And then we ended up hiring a candidate for whom they did pay half of their wages for the first 3 months. So it was a great experience for us. And that's just one of the great programs that you avail yourself to when you work with us through this Open Media Careers Engine. So Brett, would you just tell us a little bit about the Office of Economic Development and Office of Workforce Services and Rest Care?
Yeah, absolutely. So where do I start? So I mentioned federal funds. So it all comes from our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's called WIOA. That's where most of our funding comes from. So they have to be eligible for WIOA to be part of this program. However, the best program that you were talking about, Tony, I think for what you've been mentioning is on-the-job training, OJT. And we pay up to 50% of the training cost, which is usually the first 3 months. It's up to a certain dollar amount. right now we're limiting that dollar amount right around $3,000. So it's a great way to actually, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, they say, hey, we need a 95% match to this job description. And we're finding that that's usually the person they're describing 4 years into the job, right? And so we've learned that if we can back away from that 90% and really look at 70 to 80% match of the skill sets and the education and the experience that you're looking for, we can really help with that training cost in that training period. So that's why that on-the-job training really helps out. And then we really, we work with a diverse group of a whole bunch of community partners. We have our workforce center. So anyone who's been recently laid off or unemployed or are just looking for a job transition, they usually come into our workforce center. And that's how we get most of our candidates. And then we work with other groups. We have a 50+ initiative. So individuals that are 50 years or older, we're working with them to really make sure that they're getting connected to most of our opportunities out there. And then we have a huge segment of industry really looking at youth opportunities. So we get them connected to all of our youth looking for new opportunities. So we have a really diverse group of candidates that we recruit from. So we can usually deliver candidates that you can interview, like Tony said, or if you have someone that you think is a good, just a good fit for the organization. However, they might not have some of the education or experience that you're needing. That OJT would come into play. We would just have to make sure that they're eligible through WIOA services. So ResCare is our contracted partner for workforce services. So Tony has been working with Kelly, and then we just continue that program. Most of our funds end. We're closing up on our funding right now. They end last of June, and then our new budget is allocated in July. Year after year, for the past 4 years, we've had a small percentage decrease in funds. However, with the pandemic and everything going on, we're anticipating receiving the same amount of funds we did last year or more, just because we're going to have more job seekers looking for new opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett.
Yep.
Any questions for Brett about these programs? And also, is anybody else, before we move on back into the retention question, anybody else have any initiatives or programs or anything that we should know about specifically as resources for improving our capacity to recruit and hire for diversity in media and journalism? Good. If not, then yeah, as we mentioned, it's not just about getting a more diverse workforce. It's also about retaining that and making sure you have a culture that welcomes and retains a lot of what Kim and Dr. Tara J were talking about for their work at Rocky Mountain PBS. Lee's going to tell us about another program called Talent Found that's in that arena. And then we're going to hear a little bit also from Andrew from the Agora Journalism Center at University of Oregon. So Lee, do you want to talk to us a little bit about?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief, but because I definitely want to hear from Andrew, and I know we want to have a little share out at the end. But one of the things that you might start to consider utilizing as a resource, especially if you can't afford a Dr. Tara, who sounds like an amazing resource, is something that we're beginning to utilize ourselves as a part of the just next generation sector partnership model with CDLE. They pointed us in this direction, and it's definitely been a huge resource for us. So I wanted to share it with you guys. It's called Talent Found. So can everybody see this screen? Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out a few things on here. A lot of it is free to use. So if you don't have a huge HR department, if you don't have a Dr. Tara, this could be a place that you find things like, for example, retention and succession. There's lots of great things on here that you can utilize for free. On the job training, like Brett was talking about, just resources that are available. Specifically, I wanted to point out skillful.com was a really great website that's all, again, found within the Talent Found website. You can also find things like a learning continuum. So this is like on the job training, and then a self-assessment to try to figure out what you're doing really well as an organization and what you can improve upon. And this one was another really interesting resource just about that retention and how to, once you've got them in the door and you know that they're going to be a great addition, how do you keep them there and make sure that the culture is one that is welcoming, but also amplifying their authentic voice, like Kim was talking about. So I just have found that this is a really great, often free resource that does take you to some other resources like SHRM that you do have to have an account and a paid subscription to, but overall offering some pretty great free resources.
Great, thank you. I posted the link to Talent Found on the chat if anybody's interested in that, and we'll also be sharing that after the meeting. It relates to one of the follow-up goals or champion-driven priorities. Any questions for Lee about Talent Found? Great. Then next, we've been working for a few years now, off and on, and following the lead of University of Oregon's Agora Journalism Center and their work around engagement journalism. So Andrew's going to tell us a little bit about Gather and about their work and how that relates to building a culture that's better for retaining a diverse workforce in media and journalism.
Super. Thank you so much, Tony. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to chat. I'll keep it brief as well. I'll share my screen like everyone else, which I think would be just a great way to click from the agenda to what we're developed called Gather. It's basically Gather is a platform focused on engaged journalism. And just really briefly, our definition of engaged journalism is essentially, how do you find pathways for the public to participate in the process of telling stories with and for community members? So we ended up identifying that there were several engaged journalists across the country, if not the globe, but they often work in isolation because they were the ones who knew a little bit about social media, and then suddenly they became the social media or engagement editor. We wanted to flip the script on engagement from being transactional to be much more relational. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring the community of practice of engaged journalists together. And we ultimately ended up developing a platform called Gather. So it was funded by the Knight Foundation, Democracy Fund, and News Integrity Initiative. And one of the key things that I think is worthwhile to explore immediately is that we do make case studies of the different kinds of engaged journalism that's happening across the globe. So we've been developing case studies so that others can learn from what other folks are doing. So we've developed nearly 100 case studies now. It's interesting that you actually see the site as it is at the moment. We're actually going to launch a new version of the site in about a week. So you'll see a much more robust website shortly. But one case study I want to pull out is something that happened that is happening in Chicago from our friends at City Bureau, and they ended up having a program called Documenters. And I'll just quickly use this as an example because based on this conversation today, I noticed how a lot of the work that in terms of retention is this definition of bringing more of the public into the process, again, of the journalism that we produce with communities. And Documenters is a great example that we pulled out that's happening in Chicago. And one of the founders of City Bureau, Daryl Holliday, actually describes the work of this way. And I like to echo him because it's so succinct in that journalism does a great job of informing. They're doing better at engaging, but there needs to be a lot more work of equipping communities to actually help tell their own story. So if you click through that and really discover a little bit more of the Documenters program, you can get to learn a little bit more about how they're doing that. Not only are they hiring, they're identifying, hiring, and training community members to be able to document meetings across the city to feed it into a larger ecosystem of what's happening around their city. So it's just a good example. So I'll stop there. Again, the resource that I would point to is really let'sgather.in. which is again the platform that we developed. And finally, just to give a little context, I co-direct the Agora Journalism Center, which is at the University of Oregon, and we run both the project like Gather as well as host a lot of research and reports to kind of really think about how we engage with our communities so that they are participating in that process of journalism. I'll stop there and open up for questions or proceed to the rest of the agenda. Thanks.
Great. Anybody have any questions about Gather or any of the other great work that Andrew is doing? We have another working group. One of the working groups, I mentioned there's 6 that came out of the work that we've done with Boston Consulting Group, Investigative News Network, and with our own early work into the Next Generation Sector Partnership. And one of those working groups is just focused on engagement. So I imagine those of you that are interested in that working group will at least either hear from or about the work of Andrew and his colleagues in that working group as well. Feel free to chime in at any point with any other questions for Andrew. Otherwise, Jordan, let's just go on to the next part of the agenda. We were going to ask the group, is there anything else, just like I asked around recruiting and hiring for diversity, any other programs or resources anyone on the call thinks we should be aware of, or that they've seen through the Press Association or other partners that are on the call for retaining diverse workforce. We'd love to hear any other suggestions or ideas. We asked for presentations from a few people, but wanted to also make sure that this meeting had opportunity for anybody to share what they're working on. And otherwise, we want to jump into the kind of champion-driven priorities and commitments of the working group. Oh, sorry, did I skip anything, Jordan, that we need to hit on? Yeah, that's some early successes of our hiring service. Yeah, we've only hired for 6 or so positions, but we have had great success. And I think Philip, who's on the call right now, is a product of that hiring process. What's next, Jordan? Or feel free to expound if there's anything I'm missing. We had Kim. Good, and I think I asked that already. Keep going.
And Jordan, you're muted.
Well,
so yeah, I think before we get into who else we should be inviting, I think the next thing on the agenda is just talking about champion-driven priorities and commitments. And Colleen, we might want you to jump in on this one too. Part of the model for the Next Generation Sector Partnerships is that it's not, nonprofit organizations on the outskirts or anything that are kind of really setting the agenda and the priorities for these working groups. It is members of the industry. It is media organizations, journalism organizations that are participating, that are saying, like, this is what we want to champion and this is what we want to drive as a commitment and part of the working group. So we have a couple suggestions as a media entity ourselves for this kind of new working group. But I'd also love to see if there's anybody else on the call. We had a few people that have been engaged but weren't able to participate that have chimed in with some thoughts as well. So we're trying to get them more engaged in the future. But one of the things that came up for me, and I saw a tool for it in Lee's presentation, is that I would love for this working group to be tracking our internal diversity and make a commitment as a group to kind of set a baseline for the diversity of our internal organizations in any way we want to measure that, whether that's staff or board, whether that's people contributing to our stories or our volunteer base. But I thought it would be good for us to track internal diversity data, and then as the months and years go on that we're working with this working group, we can see how we're making a shift both in our own organizations and in the sector as a whole, in the Denver metro area with Colorado media and journalism organizations. Does anybody on the call already have any kind of like metric or schema for how they're tracking internal diversity. I'll mention, I'll mention that at Open Media Foundation, we have something that we called it inclusiveness score, where for our students and for our board and our staff, we've compared any of the demographics we track with the demographics of just the Denver metro area in general. And then we've tried to identify a couple demographic groups that we're doing a good job or a bad job of reflecting in our staff and our board, in the volunteers that we serve and the members that we have here at Denver Open Media. So that's a model that I think we could share. Kim had mentioned that they have a model that that we could share with the group. Does anybody else have anything else to share about that, or even just an interest in committing to doing some internal measurement of the diversity in your own organization that we could share out as a group? Bay, does this come up for the Colorado Press Association? Or Philip, has this stuff come up in any of your work with the Colorado Media Project?
So Tony, I'll be perfectly honest, it's my first week, so I'm still very new in assessing what diversity looks like. Even harder to do when you're sheltering in place. So
yeah, totally.
I am eager to sort of see what the dynamics are, and I wonder too, as you propose this, sort of how does each sort of organization measure itself? I guess, is it just a measure of yourself against oneself, or is it against other organizations? Like, what's the baseline for movement on diversity?
Yeah, thank you. This is still kind of like a new proposal, so I don't have it really fleshed out, and the idea of champion-driven priorities in this model is for the industry members to kind of devise this ourselves. So I didn't want to really kind of flesh it out too much in a vacuum, but yeah, I think that, yeah, anything that we deem important at Open Media Foundation, we evaluate the racial diversity of our staff, board members, and students. We have done some income diversity measurement with people who apply. We also track if people are participating in certain social benefit programs or have any kind of disability. So I don't think I have a good answer to that yet. But I did see, yeah, that and Lee just shared a link to it. I think when Lee was scanning through her presentation, she had a self-assessment that she showed. Lee, do you want to say anything about that?
For on-the-job training. Is equally important. And I think where a lot of people like Rocky Mountain, and maybe you too, Philip, where you're realizing that you just want to focus on the retention, but that would be a great place to start if that's where you were looking. In terms of measuring just where your staff is in diversity, I don't have a resource for that, but I would definitely, I'm going to look for one.
Great. Thanks, Lee. Yeah, so if you look in section 5C of the agenda, what we wanted to ask at this point at the very end of the meeting is just what are some of the opportunities to expand diversity engagement in local media? What could drive growth in the next few years? And what is going to be required for us to capitalize on those? So what are some goals we could take forward as a working group? If anybody has any thoughts or ideas on that right now, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, we can continue the conversation via email and engage B. Harris and some of the other people that have offered to participate in this group but weren't able to be here today. Thank you, Lee, for that link. So that we can come up with some goals as a working group. Also, Channel 7, I forget, it's Scripps. They have a big initiative and they wanted to participate in this meeting but weren't able to be here today. So I think we have a few other partners who might have some input on initiatives that they're planning on undertaking, but that could wrap around more partners in the sector that are interested in similar goals. Lee, is that is a webinar that you just posted?
Yeah, there's some upcoming webinars that's from Skillful, which was one of the websites that I highlighted around this topic, not necessarily addressing Philip's question, but another resource that might be helpful.
Okay. Well, I want to respect everyone's time, and it's 4 o'clock. I want to thank you guys for joining us. This is our first working group meeting that's happened virtually. It's hard to recreate the picture that Colleen shared with us of just the industry members in the circle and kind of like support organizations on the outskirts. And we need to keep honing our role as a convener of this group. But I really appreciate everyone being here.